Brad Gilmore sent in an audio question this week, too.
Hey, Solomonster, Brad Gilmore here. I was sitting and thinking about some of the best and some of the worst kings in professional wrestling history. In your opinion, who are the best and who are the worst?
Well, I can't say King Booker was one of the worst because he'll come after me with his golf club. Brad and Booker played some golf last week. And apparently Booker schooled him. No, actually, King Booker, I have to say, is one of the better kings that they've had in WWE history at least, because Booker was a guy who had been around for so long. You know, he had been on the roster for so many years, and he had success when he first came over. You know, he was the world heavyweight champion and that kind of stuff. But then he cooled off a little bit, and they weren't really doing much with him. When he won the crown, that really launched him back into the main event picture. It was a few months later that he, maybe even not even a few, might have been right after he won the crown, that he became the world heavyweight champion again, and he was headlining pay-per-views against, Batista. He was in the mix. He was right there in that headline mix of guys, and it really reinvigorated his career. So in that respect, I think that he probably will go down as one of the better kings in wrestling history, although I have to admit, it did get to the point, and maybe this was the point because he was a heel, but it got to the point where he and Sharmell would make their entrance on SmackDown. And I think it was Sharmell who would say, "All rise," or "All hail King Booker," but she would say it so many times, I would want to rip my ears off, or just like sew them shut. I guess that was kind of the point. That got a little annoying after a while, but I would put King Booker on that list as one of the better kings in wrestling history. And of course, there's Jerry the King Lawler, something like 40 years in the business and 100 and something championships in Memphis. He had most of his success in Memphis, not so much in WWE, although I guess just him being in WWE as long as he has is a success all by itself. So Lawler would have to be probably at the top or near the top of your list of greatest kings. Harley Race was another one. He came over from the NWA, and a lot of guys who would come over, and Dusty Rhodes was an example of this. They put him in the polka dots and probably didn't expect him to get over. He did anyway. But you never knew what was going to happen when you came over to work for Vince McMahon, if they were going to bury you, if they were going to mock you, if they were actually going to push you. Ric Flair was the great example of somebody, a top star, the top guy in the NWA, who came over, and yes, he was the chicken shit heel. He wasn't maybe quite the same, I don't want to say tough guy really, but yeah, he would go toe-to-toe with you in the NWA, whether he was in there with Sting, Flair. Yeah, he would beg off and stuff, because that's what heels did back then, but Flair was more of, I think, the chicken shit heel in WWE. But when he came over, he was right in the mix, man. He was right up in Hogan's face. He won the Royal Rumble, greatest Royal Rumble performance of all time, became the champion, and they really treated him the way that he should have been treated. They treated him like a champ. They treated him like a top guy, and they didn't, keep him in the mid-card. Harley Race is another example of a guy who was former NWA champion, 6 times, I think, and came over, and they put the crown on him, and they put him in a robe, and they made him the king. And you could argue on the one hand, what a goofy gimmick to give to one of the greatest legit tough guys in wrestling history. Now he comes over, he's wearing a purple robe, and he's the king of wrestling. But you know what? Back then, that was kind of a big gimmick, and they gave it to him. And he was prominently featured, and he had the feud with the Junkyard Dog. I know he wrestled Hulk Hogan a few times. I'd probably put Harley Race on there as one of the better kings. Of course, then there's the Macho King. How can I talk about greatest kings in wrestling without mentioning Randy Savage? That was kind of the second part of his career there in WWE. Once Elizabeth went away and they did the split, and Savage went back to being a heel, he aligned with Sensational Sherry. She was Queen Sherry. They would come out on the giant throne. He had the scepter. I love the Macho King. The Macho King gimmick I thought was great. I think he played it to a hilt. It was fantastic. It was awesome. So Macho King is at the top of my list. Then you had guys like King Haku, not so much. King Hacksaw Jim Duggan, even less. You have the King of Hearts, Owen Hart. He's got to be way up there. King Mabel, not so much. He's probably way down on the list. That didn't work out too well. Then you start getting into other kings, King Kong Bundy, Kenny King. How about the kings of wrestling? Claudio Castagnoli and Chris Hero. It's too bad they never had a run as a tag team in WWE.